I sent my cheating wife a message while she was with her lover, and now she's trapped, clueless about what's coming next. With every message I send, her heart races, and she's desperately trying to keep her composure. Just wait, her family just walked in. She's about to find out exactly what over really means. Here's how I got revenge on her. Jessica sat across from Howard in the soft glow of the elite restaurant, her laughter flowing effortlessly like a seasoned performer playing her part. Outwardly, she seemed relaxed, enjoying the evening, her eyes sparkling as she shared a quiet joke with her lover. But inside, she was anything but calm. Anxiety twisted in her stomach, a gnawing sense that something was about to go wrong. Every time her phone vibrated on the table, she flinched, a brief flicker of panic in her eyes before she forced a smile. Howard didn't seem to notice. He was charming and relaxed, sipping his wine as if the world outside this moment didn't exist. Jessica, however, knew better. This affair had been a dangerous game from the start. Howard was the opposite of her husband, Mike, wild, exciting, unpredictable. He had swept her off her feet with his boldness, the thrill of being with someone so different from the steady, kind man she had married. Mike was perfect in so many ways, a man she once loved with all her heart. But here she was, with Howard, tangled in an affair she couldn't explain even to herself. She had thought about ending it many times. She knew she should. Every meeting with Howard was an opportunity to break free, to tell him it was over. But each time, the words failed her, and the allure of him pulled her back in. Tonight, though, something was different. The moment her phone buzzed with yet another message, Jessica glanced down and felt her blood run cold. On the screen was a new notification. Enjoy this evening because it will be over soon. The message was from Mike. Suddenly, her hands felt clammy, her heart pounded in her chest. She stared at the message, trying to make sense of it. How could he know? What did he mean by it will be over soon? The world around her seemed to tilt, the noises of the restaurant fading into a distant hum. Her breath caught in her throat as she tried to keep her composure. Howard, noticing her pale face, leaned closer, his brow furrowing with concern. Are you okay? He asked, his voice soft, his hand reaching for hers across the table. Jessica forced a nod, her smile shaky. But she wasn't okay. Her world was on the brink of shattering, and she didn't know how to stop it. Howard lifted her hand to his lips, kissing it gently, oblivious to the storm brewing inside her. Then, he made another move and kissed Jessica on the lips, continuing to chat. His words were a blur to Jessica. All she could focus on was the message, the chill of Mike's warning creeping up her spine. She had no idea what he had planned, but she knew one thing: tonight would not end the way she had imagined. It started about a month ago. Mike had always trusted Jessica, never questioning her comings and goings. But one night, when she returned late from dinner with friends, something changed. As she leaned in to kiss him goodnight, he caught a faint but unmistakable scent, an expensive men's cologne, one he didn't own. That was enough to plant a seed of doubt. Mike wasn't the kind of man to act rashly. He was patient, sharp, and calculating. He didn't explode or accuse her on the spot. Instead, he quietly began to observe. Day by day, he noticed subtle shifts. Jessica seemed distracted, her eyes drifting to her phone more often than before. She was no longer careless with it, always keeping it nearby, sometimes smiling softly at the screen in a way that made Mike's stomach tighten. Her behavior told him everything he needed to know. Jessica, caught up in her affair, was too intoxicated by the excitement to realize how sloppy she had become. She thought she was being clever, that her secret life was safe. But Mike saw it all, and he wasn't just biding his time out of hurt or confusion. He was planning. Every smile, every act of kindness he showed her was deliberate, masking the storm brewing inside him. He wasn't going to explode in anger, that wasn't his way. No, Mike was waiting for the perfect moment, when Jessica would be too deep in her lies to see what was coming. Jessica's phone vibrated again, her heart leaping into her throat. With trembling hands, she glanced at the screen. Another message from Mike. Do you really think no one will find out about this? Her stomach twisted, the words blurred as panic gripped her. She forced herself to remain still, her fingers tightening around the phone, but the growing tension was impossible to hide. She couldn't just get up and leave, not here, not in the middle of this upscale restaurant where eyes could easily follow her every move. But the suffocating anxiety was building, creeping up on her like a shadow she couldn't outrun. Jessica felt the walls closing in. Howard was talking, his voice a dull hum she barely registered as her eyes darted around the room. She scanned the diners, some chatting, others absorbed in their meals. It all seemed so normal, but something was wrong. She could feel it. She glanced toward a table not too far away and froze, her pulse pounding in her ears. Sitting at that table, faces stern and unblinking, were her relatives, her uncle, her cousin with his wife, and her own sister. Their eyes were locked on her, filled with silent condemnation. Not a word was spoken, but their expressions told her everything. They knew. They knew it all. Jessica's hands began to shake, the air in the room seemed to thin, and her mind raced. Her family had always been conservative, unyielding in their values, and any hint of betrayal was something they couldn't forgive. She could feel her world unraveling right there, her secret life slipping from her grasp. The weight of their judgment bore down on her, making it hard to breathe. They didn't need to say a word. Slowly, one by one, they rose from their seats, still staring at her. Jessica watched in horror as they walked out of the restaurant, leaving her drowning in their silent curse. Her thoughts spiraled. Mike. He must have done this. He knew all along, and now he had made sure her family knew, too. The carefully constructed walls around her affair were crashing down, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. A few days earlier, Mike had met with Jessica's relatives in private. He had been calm, collected, showing them the evidence he had meticulously gathered, photos, messages, every piece of her betrayal laid out. At first, They doubted, shocked by the revelations. But Mike was steady, unwavering. He told them not to intervene, not to confront her. Instead, he asked them to simply witness how Jessica would unravel her own life. They had agreed, their faces heavy with disappointment. And now they were here to see it all come to light as Mike's revenge unfolded around Jessica. The restaurant, once warm and inviting, now seemed darker, the air heavier, as if everyone could see her guilt painted across her face. Across the table, Howard noticed her distress, his brows furrowed in concern as he leaned closer. "Jessica, what's going on?" he asked softly, his voice edged with worry. "You're shaking. Are you okay?" Jessica forced a smile, but it was weak. She couldn't tell him, couldn't explain the storm inside her head, the condemning looks from her family, the cryptic messages from Mike. Everything was closing in on her, threatening to tear her apart. She tried to calm herself, but the panic was rising fast. "I love you, Jessica," Howard said, his voice full of sincerity. He reached for her hand, holding it tightly. "If something's wrong, we'll figure it out. I won't leave you. Let's get out of here. We can go somewhere more private, somewhere quieter, just you and me." Jessica's chest tightened. She wanted to say it, let's leave, be alone, escape this nightmare. But the word stuck in her throat. Just as she was about to speak, she heard a faint buzz from Howard's phone. He glanced down, and in an instant, everything changed. His face went pale, his smile vanished, and his eyes filled with something Jessica hadn't seen before, fear. Without a word, Howard stood up. He grabbed his wallet, quickly counting out money to cover the bill. Jessica watched, bewildered. "Howard, wait. What's going on? Did something happen?" He didn't look at her, didn't answer, his movements hurried, almost frantic. Jessica reached for him, desperate to understand. "Howard, talk to me. Let me come with you." Howard's hand shot up, stopping her. His voice was firm, colder than she had ever heard it. "No, I've got serious problems to deal with. This will take a long time." Jessica's heart sank. She had never seen him like this. As he turned to leave, she caught a glimpse of his phone screen before it went dark. It was a message. Update 2. As he turned to leave, she caught a glimpse of his phone screen before it went dark. It was a message from a woman, but she hadn't seen the name. "Howard," she called out, her voice breaking, but he didn't stop. He gave her one final look, a stern, distant expression that sent a chill down her spine. "Goodbye, Jessica," he muttered, and then he was gone, leaving her standing alone. Stunned, Jessica sat in shock. She had believed Howard was free, that he had no other ties. But now, as she pieced it together, the truth began to dawn on her. He had been hiding something all along, a wife, a life he never spoke of. The man she thought she knew had his own secrets. Mike had known about Howard's double life long before Jessica ever suspected. Howard wasn't just another man looking for fun, he had a wife, and their marriage was entangled in business and property too complex to easily separate. So instead of divorcing, Howard had sought out mistresses, living out his fantasies in secret. Mike, patient and strategic, had discovered this and, a few days before tonight's dinner, had quietly slipped the details to Howard's wife. It was all coming apart for Howard now, and as Jessica sat alone at the table, it hit her, Howard wasn't going to comfort her. He wasn't coming back. He would disappear from her life just like he had vanished from the restaurant. Jessica's phone vibrated again, breaking the silence that had settled around her. She was sitting alone at the table, her eyes filling with tears that she struggled to hold back. Howard was gone, her family had abandoned her, and now she was truly alone. The screen lit up with another message from Mike. "Don't go home, Jessica. You don't have a home anymore." Her heart raced as panic surged through her. The room seemed to blur as she hastily stood, nearly knocking over her chair. She had to fix this, there had to be a way to fix this. Jessica hurried out of the restaurant, her breaths coming in short gasps as she fumbled for her keys, finally getting into her car, her hands trembling as she gripped the steering wheel. The engine roared to life, and she sped off toward the apartment, desperate to make sense of it all. The drive felt endless, her mind a whirlwind of fear and disbelief. He couldn't mean it, he wouldn't just throw her out, would he? She tried to calm herself, clinging to the hope that maybe, somehow, she could talk to Mike and explain everything. But deep down, she knew the truth, he had been planning this for a long time. When Jessica finally arrived at the apartment, a sick feeling crept over her. The door swung open easily, but the warmth she had always felt when stepping inside was gone. The place felt cold, empty. Her footsteps echoed through the room as her eyes locked on the sight before her. In the center of the living room were several cardboard boxes, neatly packed with her belongings, her clothes, her shoes, her books, all of it. The life she had shared with Mike was now reduced to a few boxes. On the shelf were 2 stacks of papers waiting for her, one was a pile of divorce papers, the other a torn-up lease. Jessica's breath caught in her throat, her chest tightened as the reality of it hit her. Mike had ended the lease. She had to leave by tomorrow. Tears welled up in her eyes, her body shaking as the sobs finally broke free. She collapsed to her knees, clutching the divorce papers as the weight of her choices crashed down on her. Mike had planned it all with chilling precision. The apartment had always been in his name, something Jessica had never thought twice about, but it gave him the leverage he needed now. While Jessica had been at dinner with Howard, thinking her world was still intact, Mike had moved quickly and efficiently. He packed her things into boxes, neatly placing them where she couldn't miss them. He signed the divorce papers, laying them out beside the torn-up lease, an unmistakable signal that her life here was over. There were no angry words, no dramatic confrontations. Mike didn't want a scene, he wanted Jessica to realize what she had lost when it was already too late. As Jessica sat on the floor, tears streaming down her face, her phone buzzed one last time. The final message from Mike appeared on the screen. Jessica, you made your choice. Jessica lay on the cold floor of the apartment, sobbing uncontrollably, the weight of everything crushing her. The apartment, once filled with warmth and love, now felt like a tomb, cold and empty, with only the boxes of her things as reminders of the life she had lost. Her tears seemed endless as she tried to wrap her mind around the finality of it all. In a desperate haze, Jessica reached for her phone, her trembling fingers hovering over Mike's contact before she pressed call. The phone rang, the long beeps echoing in the silent apartment, each one tearing through her heart like a knife. But no one answered. Mike was ignoring her. She remembered the plans they had made together, the life they were supposed to build. In 3 months, they were going to buy a house, leave this city behind for a fresh start. They had even talked about having kids. They had dreams, plans for the future, all rooted in their love, and now, because of one reckless affair, everything was destroyed. Jessica hadn't wanted to lose Mike. She hadn't wanted to lose everything. All she had wanted was to feel that thrill, that secret excitement with Howard. She thought it would be harmless, a secret fling, but it had shattered her life in ways she never anticipated. In a moment of despair, she thought of Howard. Maybe he would help her, maybe he could explain everything. She dialed his number, holding her breath, waiting for him to answer, but there was nothing, not even a beep. Confused, she tried again, but the same silence greeted her. It took her a moment to realize what had happened. Howard had blocked her. She was cut off completely. He had vanished from her life just like that, disappearing into the shadows where their affair had thrived. Jessica's heart sank deeper, her chest tightening with an overwhelming sense of abandonment. Had she meant nothing to him at all? The hurt became too much. Rage boiled inside her, a bitter fury at the world, at herself, at everything. She leapt to her feet and kicked the nearest box, sending it flying. She punched another, spilling its contents across the floor, clothes, books, trinkets from her life with Mike all scattered like broken pieces of her soul. She screamed and kicked, letting out every bit of pain until her body ached and her breath came in ragged gasps. 20 minutes later, exhausted and hollow, she collapsed in the middle of the mess she had created, tears streaming down her face as she gasped for air, feeling utterly lost. With shaky hands, she grabbed her phone again and dialed her uncle. He answered after the second ring, his voice stern and heavy. The silence between them was thick with tension, the memory of his cold stare at the restaurant still fresh in Jessica's mind. "Uncle, I need your help," Jessica whispered, her voice cracking. Her uncle's tone was hard, unforgiving. "My girl, you made a big mistake. This is a shame to our family." Jessica choked back a sob, but her tears kept coming. "Please, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I need you." Her uncle's sigh came through the phone, heavy with disappointment. "I promised your father, Jessica. I promised him I'd look after you. But you didn't just betray Mike, you betrayed all of us, your father, your family. You've put us all in a difficult place." "I didn't mean to," Jessica sobbed. I never wanted this." For a long moment, her uncle said nothing. Then, with a deep sigh, his tone softened slightly. "Family doesn't abandon its own. I won't leave you, Jessica, but you need to understand, you will have to atone for this. It's not going to be easy, and things between us won't be the same, not until you've made this right." Jessica's heart broke all over again as she felt the shame burn through her, but at least she wasn't completely alone. "Thank you, uncle," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Don't thank me yet," he replied, his voice still firm. "There's a long road ahead. You'll have to earn back our trust." The call ended, leaving Jessica with the sound of silence once again. She dropped the phone, her body limp and heavy with despair. She couldn't bring herself to move. All she could do was lie there, curled up on the cold floor as the darkness of the night swallowed her whole. Hours passed, but she didn't care. She stayed there, still and broken, until the first light of morning crept through the window, casting pale shadows on the walls of the empty apartment. Thanks for watching, and thank you all for your support.